Hello, beloved in Lord. It's good to be with you. I wish I could be having this conversation with you over coffee, a nice cup of tea, maybe iced coffee. I don't know. It's hot outside. But in any case, I wanted to take a few minutes to share with you some things that the Lord has been revealing to me here at Agape First Ministries about the next generation. So, those of you that know me, you know that the Lord has called me to raise up a generation. 20 years ago, I was sitting on my patio, my front porch. I wasn't even married yet, and the Lord spoke to me and He said, Nate, I am calling you to raise up a generation in my love and in my power. And this will be a Moses generation, a generation that will lead the church out of her Egypts. And at the time, I was working with youth, and um, this landed quite well. Yes and amen, Lord. I love working with the next generation, and so that's really the course that the Lord laid out for me. One of the primary uh, callings on my life. So raising up a generation, and then my other, not other, it's they're one and the same, but my calling to the place of prayer and worship and all of that. So this is something that's been on my heart. I've given my life to it. As many of you know, I've worked with primarily youth all throughout my ministry. Youth and young adults who are struggling with their gender identity, struggling with same sex attractions, struggling with all kinds of relational brokenness issues. And it's been a wild ride. When I started in the ministry 20 years ago, I had no clue what the Lord was going to do. Uh, all I knew is what He was doing in me. And He was doing a profound work in me as I would sit in His presence for extended periods of time, studying the Word, praying, worshiping. God was changing me, and so that was really all I had to go on the front end. And I just invited young people into that, and God started doing some radical things. So that's always been a guiding light for me. Well, as many of you know, there's been, I think, some renewed concern for the next generation, as we've seen some of the statistics that have come out recently. 40% of Gen Z identifies as LGBTQ, somewhere in there. I think this was a startling statistic for many of us. Um, for me, for most of my time in ministry, that percentage was profoundly lower. 2 to 3% of the population identified as gay for most of the time that I've been in this line of work. And so in a generation, we saw this explosion, and not just in that arena, but the depression that kids are struggling with, the anxiety disorders, the use of medications for all of these different disorders that are happening. It's just exploded, and we that bears witness, and all the statistics that have come out. And so I've been in a place of really seeking the Lord, and I charged my staff too. I said, we are going to seek the Lord, for His heart on this. What's going on? Where have we failed the next generation? What do we need to do to remedy the problem? So we've been doing that. And I have to tell you, and this is why I'm making this video, I have to tell you that I have great hope for the next generation. And I want to share why I have great hope for the next generation in this video. And I'm going to be sharing about a couple conversations I've had with some young people from some Gen Zers, I guess is what you'd call them. They were very, very encouraging to me. So, yes, the statistics are real. The depression is real. The anxiety is real. The isolation, everything that's happening, I think there's some reality to that. And yet, I have great hope for the next generation. I believe that we are on the verge of a profound move of the Lord. And this excites me. I think we're right on the precipice of something great happening. So when we look at the next generation, yes, there's a lot of depression, there's a lot of sexual brokenness. They're probably the most disconnected generation. And when I say Gen Z, and then of course, after that's Gen A, I think we're back to Alpha. So I'm kind of lumping them all in when I say next generation. Anybody younger than me. So profoundly disconnected, even though, they think that they are connected, right? There's so much of this, being on our phones, being on social media, and yet so isolated, so disconnected, so narcissistic. This is the me generation. And yet, there's a really amazing prophecy. It's either in Zechariah or Zephaniah. I was going to highlight it. Be more prepared for your videos, Nate. There's a really amazing prophecy. I'll put it in the notes, the notes, where the Lord is prophesying about the generation when He returns. And are we in the generation of the Lord's return? I don't know. Things seem to be lining up in a certain way, but I'm not gonna. That's not what this is about. But the prophecy is that the generation of the Lord's return is going to be a humble generation. A humble generation. Could it be that the Lord, in only the way that He can, will take this depressed, anxious, isolated, disconnected, narcissistic generation and through His leadership do something. It's going to be miraculous. I think we call it revival in the church, right? There's going to be this move of God that's going to call forth this profound humility, and I really believe that's going to happen. So I have great hope for Gen Z, and I want to kind of rekindle your hope for Gen Z. My hope isn't in Gen Z. My hope is in Jesus, who is Lord over all. He's Lord over this generation, and He has a plan and a purpose and a destiny for this generation. He is the perfect leader. So my hope is in the leadership of Jesus, who is desiring to lead Gen Z, and He is. He is, the Lord reminded me of Isaiah 9, and I want to take us into that for just a few moments. I'm going to kind of give you the overview of some of the ideas. I hope you'll dig into it, and yeah, I'll read you the menu. You order the meal, because I think there's a word in here, an application for the next generation, which is what I love about the Word of God. There's just so much that we can glean and take in, and so much to encourage us. But this chapter is about the leadership of Jesus. So, we read it a lot at Christmas because it is one of the great Christmas passages, but it's bigger than Christmas. It talks about the people who walk in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined. Now, if there is a generation that is walking in darkness, we can definitely say that about Gen Z. However, all generations have walked in, some darkness. So we're not singling them out. We're not saying they're the worst or anything like that. But, as I highlighted, statistically speaking, there's a lot of struggle there. There's a lot of darkness that is happening. The answer to the darkness, and this is always true, is the answer is the light. The light is always the solution to the darkness. And who's the light? Well, yes, it's Jesus, of course, but it's also us. And this is what I love about working with young people is I just get to be light, I just get to, and I get to introduce them to the light, Jesus. Um, so I believe that there are times when the light just breaks out in a greater measure. And, the Lord's light is always with us. He's Emmanuel, right? God with us. And yet there are those times when the power and presence of God breaks out in a very unique and profound and miraculous way. Like I said earlier, it's called revival. And if you ask me, this is really the only solution to what we're dealing with now with all the division and just the stuff we're fighting about. Even in the church, God has got to come and settle these issues. And we really need his light to give us clarity into the things that we're wrestling with. And so that's my prayer. And I want to exhort you all to make that your prayer. God, let your light, the light of your Son, Jesus, let it break out on the next generation. Because he wants to. That's his heart. Well, continuing on in Isaiah 9, it talks about Jesus being born, and then it talks about some of the dimensions or aspects of his leadership. And this is why I'm encouraged, okay? This is why I'm excited. I'm excited for Gen Z. Even you hear the statistics and you're a little daunted, and it's like, whoa, it's really dark and weighty. But I am today. I'm excited about Jesus and what he desires to accomplish. And this is a famous passage, but I just want to read it and apply it to this particular issue because I believe it does have an application here. It says, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders." So there you go. He's the leader, right? This is about Jesus's leadership. And what are some of the aspects or dimensions of his leadership? Well, first of all, it says his leadership is wonderful. Now, sometimes you might hear it read wonderful counselor, but there's a comma between the word wonderful and counselor, and there's a comma in the original language as well. So there's two aspects of Jesus's leadership that's being talked about. First of all, he's wonderful. He's full of wonder. He's awe-inspiring. He's a miracle-working God. He does these amazing things that fascinate and exhilarate our human spirits. Now, we have a generation, Gen Z, and they are looking to be fascinated. They are looking for exhilaration. And, some things that they're seeing on their phones, it's a counterfeit, right? It's a counterfeit exhilaration. It's a counterfeit fascination, because there is no greater fascination, or there's nothing that exhilarates the human spirit like the revelation of Jesus, who he is and what he does. And again, when I work with young people, I'm introducing them to this Jesus, and I'm teaching them how to behold him in a way that they experience fascination that's greater than some of the other things that have held their gaze, right? It's the King David passage in Psalm 27 where he says, "One thing have I desired. I want to gaze upon your beauty, and I want to talk to you." I mean, this is the strategy. I'm telling you. It's that simple. We just need to look at God and talk to God, and I get it. There's other things that are part of that. But, big picture, macro strategy, if we look at God and talk to him, I mean, the beautiful, uncreated God, there's nothing more fascinating, nothing more exhilarating. He is wonderful. And this is what the next generation is longing for. And I believe with all of my heart that God wants to reveal himself to the next generation as wonderful. Second thing the passage says is that he's counselor. And this means he knows what to do. He has the strategy to solve the problem. He knows how to bring forth justice, and how to make the wrong things right. So when I hear things like, anxiety disorders off the charts, depression off the charts, social anxiety, I mean, not being able to connect or just relate to other people, the mental illness stuff. He's a counselor. He knows how to solve these problems in the soul. And again, that's kind of my forte, right? I just love the whole thing of inner healing, and I get to do that with people. But even bigger than that, Jesus knows how to solve the problems that we see in culture, the racial issues that we're dealing with. The just it's off the charts right now. Everything that's going on, Jesus knows how to make the wrong things right and how to solve the problems. And so we need the leadership of Jesus. The next thing it says is that he's the mighty God. So not only does Jesus know the strategy, he knows what to do, he is the power to back up his word. So, this is this is so cool, right? He knows what to do, and then like he can accomplish it, right? He's the everlasting Father. And I mean, there's so much that could be said about this in the age of fatherlessness that we are in. So many young people who are just wandering, they don't know who they are. Fathers play such a unique role in the lives of their kids. They bless and affirm gender identity. This is who you are. They bring a sense of stability to the home. They create boundaries. They're that picture of masculine strength, good godly masculine strength, and that's missing from the lives of so many young people. And everywhere you look, you see fatherlessness. But the Lord is the everlasting Father, and he isn't gonna leave. I think that's one of the things we could say about that word everlasting. I mean, this next generation, how much do they need? Oh, apparently I had an alarm set. How much do they need a father who's gonna last, right? A father who's not going to abandon them, a father who's not going to go anywhere. This is the leadership of Jesus. He comes to the next generation. He says, I'm not going anywhere. You can, kick and scream and resist, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. And then lastly, it talks about the leadership of Jesus. He is the Prince of Peace. The anxiety, the fear. And there is a spirit of fear that has taken hold of the next generation. And yet Jesus is the Prince of Peace who sits on a sapphire throne. I love that. I tell my kids that, oh, Jesus sits on a sapphire throne. And anyway, I'm getting on the point. I really love the throne room, and I love to just gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. So I want to know what color his throne is. It's blue. All right. So getting back to the topic, this is the leadership of Jesus. And so I have so much hope for the next generation because I have hope in the leadership of Jesus. He's led every generation since time began. He's led every generation faithfully. Certainly he's going to do that to the next generation. And then, this section of scripture ends with the zeal of the Lord will perform this. God is zealous the Father is zealous to establish Jesus as king. The Father has a lot of zeal about establishing Jesus as rightful leader. So I can rest in that. You can rest in that. I pray that too. I say, Lord, stir up your zeal for your Son. Stir up your zeal for the leadership of Jesus. And I pray that for my city. I say, Lord, that Jesus would be established as leader and king over the Twin Cities and over the next generation. Stir up your zeal for the next generation, Lord. Well, I yesterday, I met with a couple young people individually, and I just want to give you just a snapshot of my time, because this is really where kind of uh, the Lord renewed so much of my hope, because I'm human. I get weighed down by the statistics and the just everything that's happening to young people. But I met with a young man, and I've been meeting with him for a season now. 20 years old, so right there in that Gen Z category. Um, I Bible college student, working to become a youth pastor. So he's done a lot of. He works with youth. That's something that he does. And so I wanted to talk to him about his personal experience, but also as somebody who works with young people. And it was really encouraging. One major takeaway I'm getting from all of the young people that I'm meeting with is that God is moving in this generation. God is still God. He's encountering young people. He's raising up young leaders that are turning to Him with all of their hearts, and they're following Him. And if they have struggles and things that they're dealing with, they're getting the right kind of help. So it's been a real joy to help this young man where he's needed help. And then, to be able to kind of pick his brain. And it was eye opening. This is somebody who went to public school. So I got to kind of pick his brain in that field. And I just want to, this is just a little aside, right? I think sometimes we sometimes, you know, maybe give public schools a bad name. Um, and not to say that there isn't some things there that I find concerning, but I will say this too. I work with just as many homeschool kids as I do public school kids. I work with just as many Christian private school kids. So, so I don't think we can just say that's the big reason. In fact, I probably meet with more homeschool kids than any other group. Maybe I haven't tallied the statistics, but it's more than one, more than two. Um, so the issue is deeper than that. Um, anyway, I'm not here to tell you my opinions on that stuff. Everybody gets to make their own decision, and everybody needs to follow the Lord in His leadership about what you do with your kids. That's all I'm gonna say about it. My kids go to private Christian school, whatever. Uh, you know, that's not the point. Um, my point was that there's deeper issues regardless of where your kids go to school if they're struggling with their gender identity. Okay. Um, so talking with this young man, and we talked about that a little bit. I'm like, well, you went to public school, and how'd that impact you? And for him, it really didn't impact him all that much. Um, but he said something to me that was profoundly eye-opening, because I said, well, my kids go to private Christian school, and yet they both my oldest sons have friends that have come out as gay or lesbian or transgender that they go to school with, tiny little Christian school. And he said, yeah, but here's the thing, Nate, they're all going home to the same phone. And that blew my mind, because we were talking about social media and the impact of social media on young people. And he was, I'm not on social media a lot. I struggle to even post on Facebook. So I don't have TikTok, or I think I had Snapchat for like a minute, because anyway, my kids wanted it, but I'm like, no, you don't get to do that. um, so I'm not as familiar, but he was telling me about social media, and it was just mind blowing how, when you want to talk about indoctrination, the stuff that is flashing in front of you, and the ads and the things that you can click on, that are causing you to think things in your own mind. And so and yet you think you're connected to a human being because you're like messaging each other, but it's really only keeping you disconnected. And so, when I thought about this, okay, so like, there are these kids, maybe they're in homeschool, maybe they're in private school, maybe they're at public school. That's not the point. The point is when they come home, are they all on the same phone? Now, I know some kids don't get to have this, but those that do, how much is this, the social media, impacting how they're thinking and viewing the world? So, he was telling me, my kids, here's the kids that he ministers to in youth group, are profoundly socially inept, that they don't know how to connect, because they're all going home, they're locking themselves in their bedrooms, and then they're on social media. So they don't have that confidence, just to like be with people. And the internet is fueling their fantasy world. This is their connection to the world. Now, this should be alarming to us when I think about, again, the things that are coming and flashing in front of us and that we can click on and the little places that it leads us. We have this isolated, disconnected world that's looking to social media, and it's they're living in a fantasy world. So that was a really eye-opening thing, for me, and it really gave me pause. Like, okay, we have to, as parents, maybe we need to pump the brakes a little bit with how much access we're giving our kids to the internet and social media and things like that. It's a common argument in my house. Why can't we be on social media? I'm like, no, you cannot do that. Anyway, I'll be the bad guy. I don't care. But as we began to talk about his peers and just his generation, he thought the 40% LGBT statistic was a kind of a bunch of garbage. And here's why. Um, you know, people are they're kind of living two different lives. There's the online fantasy world, who I am when I'm disconnected from everybody. And then there's the person that I am when I'm outside interacting with the real world. And, there really is a push, I think, on social media in the public to be more pansexual, to eradicate the gender binary, removing all of those kind of boundaries and those sorts of things. So that is a real agenda. And sometimes I think we're intimidated. We feel like we have to toe the line. We're going to check that box. But what I left this conversation remembering is that boys are still boys and girls are still girls, and eternity is written on our hearts, and there's just something intrinsic built into us that's going to rise to the top. Um, that's gonna prevail because it's just built into us. I really don't think that we can brainwash the world into some androgynous state. Now, again, more people are struggling with this issue. It is real, but I just want to kind of give us some hope that, you know, we have something intrinsic to who we are that breaks through. You know, men are still going to break through. Women are still going to break through, even though the enemy is working overtime to thwart that. What he did say, this young man did say, is that really it's the vulnerable that are falling prey to this, that are susceptible to this. People with the mental illness issues, or even things like Asperger's, or you know, what's the autism, that sort of thing. I think statistics show that there's more transgender people who are on the Asperger's spectrum. So anyway, it was just enough to get me thinking and get me hopeful again. Just the reminder that not only is God still God, his leadership is perfect, he's got a destiny for this generation, and he's zealous about that, but also that there's just something about who we are as people men and women, it's in our DNA that tends to break through for the most part. If you have, even just a few good tools and skills, right? That's going to happen. And that bears witness with intersexed people. Intersex people used to be called hermaphrodites, so there's a birth defect that has impacted their genitalia. However, even though there's a birth defect issue, they still have either male DNA or female DNA, and back in like the 1960s when there was an intersex baby born, the doctor would look at the parents and say, well, what do you want, boy or girl? um, and so the parent kind of give the parents a choice. What they found is that if that child was not surgically repaired in a way that lined up with their DNA, they would still gravitate towards their DNA. And it caused a lot of hurt and pain for some people. One famous story, I won't get into right now, but just of a young man who was raised as a girl, but he returned to being a boy, and it unfortunately his story didn't end well. Um, but that's what we found, and so now doctors are they'll say, well, let's do a DNA test, and then we'll repair the birth defect, in agreement with the DNA. So boys are still boys, girls are still girls, and I think that there's something in that, in the human nature, on that very level, that will prevail. So that was a really wonderful conversation I had with this young man. Right following that, so right on the heels of that, at another meeting with a client, 20-year-old young man, super passionate about Jesus, just sold out for the Lord. And I had a chance to pray with him. And, you know, he just had this amazing encounter with the Lord. And, I didn't even really, I was kind of observing the whole thing. Normally I have to, maybe give a little bit more guidance, in inner healing prayer, but he just went all in. And it was awesome to see. And again, I just thought, Lord, you are leading this next generation. You're raising up a people for your name, and you can't be stopped. Working with another young girl who I have been a couple of years now. When she came in, identified, I think, as non-binary. I always get them kind of mixed up. Non-binary, maybe trans, but a lot of brokenness issues. And so now here we are 2 years later. This young lady is in a very, very different place. Um, it's exciting to see. Now, this is a hard work that I've been called to, and it's a long work. I know that every time a young person is sitting across from me, they're coming in, they're freshmen, they're a sophomore in high school, or maybe a freshman in college. And when I'm agreeing to meet with them, I'm signing up for the long haul. This is going to be 4 or 5 years of my life that I'm signing up for, because we're navigating all of the roller coaster of you know uh, high school. You couldn't pay me to do high school again, right? It's a roller coaster. There's just so much that happens in us in that time. Um, but what an amazing thing to see people encounter the Lord, young people, and to watch their lives transformed. And now, having done this for 20 years, a lot of those young people that I started out ministering to, they're grown up. They're married. They have children. I get to hold their babies and watch their children grow, and watch them just be amazing husbands and wives and mothers and fathers. This is so cool, because God is working, and God is still God. Um, So Jesus is the perfect leader, and he's zealous for Gen Z, and I have so much hope about what he is doing and what he's going to do. Jesus is going to take this generation, and through his miraculous, wonderful leadership, the wonderful counselor, the everlasting Father, the mighty God, the Prince of Peace, he is going to leave behind a humble generation. That's my hope. That's my prayer. And I wanted to share that with you because I'm a little fired up. I've been a little down about it. And that's why I've been seeking the Lord and praying. And sometimes you just need to look right in front of you, right? And I get to meet with all these young people, and God's moving. So I'm like, okay, well, God's still God, right? And I hope this encourages your hope as well. God has placed some really wonderful, helpful, qualified leaders to minister to the next generation. And I'm maybe one of them, but there's so many more people that God has raised up to shepherd this next generation. And then he himself is a shepherd to this next generation. So we're going to continue to pray, that God's light would break forth, stir up your zeal, all these things. We're going to continue to pray, but we're going to do it with a renewed sense of hope that God wants to do this, and he's so good at it, and we can trust him because he's been doing this a long time. Throughout history, he's done this a long time, and he's really good at it. So I love you guys. Hey, we would continue to just seek your prayers here at Agape First. There's a lot of stuff that we're doing, and a lot to come. So much coming this fall. I'm traveling again, going to Texas, going to Nebraska. Other places, things coming up. If you have a heart to give and the means to do so, we would love for you to bless us financially. This stuff does cost money, and we see that our expenses are increasing as ministry increases, and a lot of times young people, can't really afford to pay anything or much at all. And so we just offer this to them. This is our gift, to the next generation. It's my calling. So this is for them. But if you can help offset that, we would be blessed. So God bless you guys. Hope this encourages you. Have a great day.